So anyway, well, Clint, thank you so much for taking the time to talk to me today. I was just hoping you would start by telling us a little bit about yourself, since I think many of my readers won't be familiar with your work.
Sure, absolutely. Yeah, I am a native Iowan. My grandparents on my mom's side were farmers over in western Iowa, right outside Council Bluffs. And my dad's side, there are lots of United Methodist pastors in the family. So my grandfather and my dad were both small town United Methodist pastors. I was born in Harlan, grew up in small towns until I was in middle school and then moved to Des Moines. From Des Moines, went through college, eventually graduated from the University of Iowa. And my final year at Iowa, I started getting interested in learning more about my faith and decided that I would go to seminary. Went to seminary in Chicago, and then my wife went to grad school in at the University of Minnesota, and so we moved up to Minneapolis, where I served a small church on the edge of Minneapolis suburbs. And then we, like a whole lot of Iowans, when we had kids, decided to move back to Iowa so that we could be close to grandparents. So in the Methodist Church, when you say to the bishop, you want to come back to Iowa, the bishop says, you're going to this town. So that's how we ended up in Cedar Rapids, and have been here really for the last 24 years. Started out serving a church in Cedar Rapids, and eventually felt like I was being called to work more with low income and marginalized communities, neighborhoods. And so my brother and I in 2006 started developing this plan to launch Matthew 25, a new nonprofit, faith based nonprofit. Um, so we really started working hard at it in 2007, and then the floods happened in 2008, and we were right there in the flood zone. And my brother's house was actually flooded. The place where the building we were in was a 100-year-old church. Never had water in the basement. And people said, "Oh, don't worry, it'll be fine." Well, the whole building was destroyed by
Mm.
the flood. And so we jumped in and just started helping neighbors. Eventually, we're part of creating a program called Block by Block that raised about $6 million and helped 300 homeowners to fix up their homes and move from being part-time employees to having about 20 people working with us on flood recovery. Out of there, we started growing Matthew 25 kind of slowly over the years. At this point, Matthew 25 employs around 40 people and does everything from run grocery stores, a grocery store in what had been a food desert, runs an urban farm, a cafe. It's the state's only pay it forward cafe where people can come in and get a healthy meal for whatever they can afford. We have rental housing, a tool library, just a variety of neighborhood revitalization programs. And so I left Matthew 25 a couple of weeks ago so that I could put my efforts into running for Congress.
And have you had a pulpit this whole time, or did you switch at some point to being full time for Matthew 25?
Yeah, really from 2007 when I started at Matthew 25, that was my part-time and eventually full-time job. So I do preaching at local churches here and there, but mainly it's been to talk about Matthew 25 and sometimes as a substitute kind of fill-in pastor or whatever, but I haven't had a congregation for the last 15, 17 years.
And you said you're going to be devoting your full-time efforts to this congressional campaign.
Right, right. Yep.
And when did you start thinking about running for Congress?
It really wasn't until after this last election, and the last election just kind of shifted some things in my mind where I just saw that more and more we're continuing to tear each other apart and talk about our differences instead of trying to find common ground and unite behind common cause. And January, I had been reading a book and started thinking and praying about this with my wife and with other friends, and really didn't make the decision until after spending April and May really driving through the district, just kind of talking to people on the streets and hearing their concerns, their struggles, their hopes, and yeah, decided after that that this should be something I would pursue.
And what are some of your top issues or your priorities that you plan to emphasize during the campaign?
Yeah, a few different things. One, I would say that small town Iowa and close knit communities are kind of the heartbeat of Iowa in a lot of ways, right? We are such a unique state. We have some of the best land in the world, beautiful small towns, and some of them have started to kind of disintegrate compared to what they were like when I was a kid. And so I would love to see us invest in, the land, the water, the people, really revitalizing some of our downtown main streets, having economic development really take root in those rural areas of Iowa. The second would be just general affordability. Everywhere I go, I feel like people are talking about high prices of groceries and housing, and it just seems like there's no real plan to get those under control. Instead, we do things like throw tariffs on wood and other things that will drive prices up. And then third would be I keep hearing how concerned some of our retired citizens are that things that they thought they could depend upon, like Medicare, Social Security, having good health care in their county, those things are being stressed or taken away, reduced. And so, really focused on trying to protect those things for those folks.
And you mentioned that you'd been on the road a little bit. How many of the counties have you visited this year, would you say? At the counties in the district?
Yeah, I would say that I've been in every county in the district. Some of them, it's only been 30, 40 minutes and stopping in a coffee shop and chatting with people or whatever. Others, it's been a whole day, but
Mhm.
in some way, shape, or form, I've been in everyone.
And many people, I mean, I would say the stereotype that we have in politics is that pastors who get involved in politics tend to be on the right. So, have you found that people have that impression, or what would you say to dispel people's stereotypes about people of faith in politics?
Yeah, that's a fairly recent phenomenon in the last 40, 50 years. If you look further back in the history of, United Methodism in particular, they helped to get unions going, a 40-hour work week, those kinds of things throughout their history. And um, I, I think generally where we as people of faith should be is as independent from the partisan political fray as possible, and trying to think, where is God calling us to be on each issue? I think aligning with a party can sometimes be and should be challenging for people of faith.
Hmm. I've been asking all of the candidates for Congress some version of this question. In March, the Congress approved a continuing spending resolution to keep the government funded through the end of September, and that's going to be coming up again. And some people were very critical of how some of the Democrats in the U.S. Senate voted for that spending resolution to stop the government from shutting down. Most of the Democrats in Congress voted against the spending bill. But how would you approach a question like that? I mean, Senator Chuck Schumer, among others, said that while he thought that the spending bill was bad, that shutting down the government would be worse. But would you be willing to go to the mat, possibly even forcing a government shutdown if you were in Congress?
Yeah, I think that would have to be evaluated given the circumstances at that time, right? But overall, I would say most people look at Congress and feel like it's totally dysfunctional the way it's working right now, whether it's that we do things in these huge continuing resolution bills, or we use other methods to not really debate the single issues and work them through a full process that's vetted. We don't reach across the aisle and try to bring in different opinions and use everyone's viewpoints and knowledge to create the best things possible. And so to me, that vote is a symptom of, on one hand, you have a president that's just trying to run roughshod over Congress and people that are lining up and saying that they'll support whatever uh, he says he wants. And on the other hand, people not wanting to give an inch. And I think we all do better when we try to figure out ways to work together.
You've been over the district. This is a district that voted for Donald Trump last time by about 10 points. What would be your approach to turning things around so that a Democrat could carry this district? This Northeast Iowa in the not too distant past did elect Democrats to Congress.
Right. Well, and it's interesting if you look at the numbers, really, Rob Sand won this district, right? And so I think he shows that you can win this district if you're a Democrat. And part of the roadmap for that, right, is that sometimes Democrats have almost ceded rural areas. I think that there has to be a different approach to that. When I was growing up as a kid in small town, you were just as likely to be Democrat as Republican. And we need to get back to making sure that we're reaching out to everyone. And the second part is really this is, I think we're already in a hard place economically, and it's probably not going to improve over the last year, just given the next year, just given the things that are being passed. And so I think we're going to be in a place where there's more potential. People are upset and want change in a way that maybe they haven't always in the past.
You're one of two announced candidates so far. There may be a third Democratic candidate running for Congress. What would be your message to voters in the second district who say, well, I like all of these candidates, so why should they vote for you in the primary?
I hope they'll like all of us. I mean, I think we're all going to be good people that are trying to work really hard and do well by them. But I think what differentiates me is that I have been on the ground for the last 20 years working with people, helping to solve real problems, right? I haven't been a politician that's kicked the can down the road or that's been hyper partisan, that kind of thing. So I think that's a difference. I think it matters when you've run an organization and you have to make payroll every 2 weeks. You have people that are dependent upon you. You have to operate in the real world of running a grocery store, running a cafe, building housing. You get to know what are the real costs out there and what are the levers that could be pulled to kind of change those. So I think that's going to be what differentiates me.
Is there anything I didn't ask that you think would be important for my readers to know, either about you personally or about your campaign?
I think just to reiterate again, that Matthew 25 has been this place where we pull together people of every party to work on solving really basic issues of housing and food and community revitalization, right? And I think that track record of 20 years is not going to change because I'm a congressional candidate. I think it's important that people know I'm very grounded in who I am and what my values are. And those values have started with listening to everyone. And that's what I intend to do as a candidate. I know people worry. There's often this talk that, oh, you go to Washington and you change. But I think I'm one of those candidates that should not be a concern for people. They should be able to look at me and know Clint's shown us over the last 20, 30 years of his life exactly who he is, and that's who he'll be.
I realized I forgot to ask you. I know you said you haven't been that active in politics, you haven't run for office, but have you been involved in any kind of advocacy with the state legislature or with your members of Congress, your representatives in Congress, to try to encourage them to vote for or against certain bills? And if so, what are some of the issues that you have been engaged on?
Yeah, I've been engaged really primarily in local issues. So, like the issue of homelessness and affordable housing in Cedar Rapids, I've been pretty focused on, how do we help create a thing called the equitable housing group here. And it really has been focused on how do we get more funding for affordable housing. So that is translated into funding for housing trust funds, whether it's on the state level or trying to get more national funds for affordable housing. We've done some things with food and recognizing that food is, we are what we eat, as our mom said when we were kids, right? And everybody should have access to healthy food. And so we've advocated for that on the state level and kind of pushed at times for increased SNAP benefits, focus on healthy foods in low-income neighborhoods, that kind of thing.
Well, thank you so much for taking the time to talk to me again.
Yeah, thank you, Laura. It's really
Yeah,
great to meet you and look forward to continuing to chat as this goes on.
good, absolutely.
All right, take care.
Thanks, Laura.
All right, bye.
Bye.